Chapter 16. Changing Course. My obsession with Kiss never really wavered. I was still a rabid fan and would follow their every move. After the mini reunion Kiss had on MTV Unplugged in 1995, they announced that they would be reuniting with Peter Criss and Ace Frehley and putting their signature makeup back on. My mind was blown. Since Eric Carr's passing, Kiss was never really the same to me. I always thought the Revenge album was a bit overrated. Around this time, I ended up with a bootleg of their most recent album, Carnival of Souls. It was very heavy and dark, not Kiss-like at all. Of course, I still loved it because it was Kiss, but it wasn't like the 70s and 80s Kiss that I was obsessed with. Now that Ace and Peter were back in makeup, though, I knew big things were on the horizon. The first appearance of the reunited Kiss was on the 1996 Grammy Awards. It was surreal and chilling to see the four original members of Kiss walk out on that stage looking exactly like they did in 1978. Then, more than ever, I realized what geniuses Kiss really were. The makeup made them absolutely timeless. It no longer mattered that they were aging rock stars in their late 40s. When they put that makeup on, they were just Kiss, instantly transformed into my childhood superheroes. I felt like I was 5 years old again while watching the Grammys that night. Shortly after their Grammy appearance, Kiss announced a world tour with the first show being at Detroit's Tiger Stadium. I immediately called all of my old friends to try and convince someone into going with me to Detroit. Unfortunately, I had no takers. Even though some of my friends and former bandmates liked Kiss, no one was obsessed like I was. At that time, I didn't know one single Kiss fan that liked them the way I did. Even though I couldn't convince anyone to come to Detroit with me, they all said yes to go to the shows when Kiss came to New York at Madison Square Garden. Kiss would play 4 straight nights at MSG in 1996. The day that tickets went on sale, I bought as many seats as I could for those shows. I knew between all of my friends, I could find people to go with me every night. Those 4 nights at Madison Square Garden watching my heroes, the original Kiss in makeup, really rejuvenated me and my drive to make it as a drummer. All I kept thinking to myself while watching was, somehow, some way, I had to get up on that stage with them. Kiss were my idols. They were larger-than-life superheroes to me. Dare I say, gods. Now, 17 years after I first saw them at MSG, I felt as though I was at least in the same ballpark as them. I knew I could play my instrument just as well, and I wanted more than anything to one day show them. Right after Dogfish broke up, I had to figure out my next move in the music business. I didn't want to just blindly keep pursuing my dream. I needed to be focused and smart. Knowing that the rock scene was completely dead, I had to figure out a suitable alternative. In early 1998, I began combing the music papers again for bands looking for a drummer. By the late 90s, I started to like a few new bands that were on the radio, like Oasis, Hootie and the Blowfish, the Goo Goo Dolls, and Train. This was the type of music I wanted to start playing. Even though I still loved Kiss more than every other band combined, I knew that I needed to once again shift my focus into what was being sold and popular at the time. One ad in particular struck my interest. It was for an indie sign band doing retro pop rock music looking for a drummer. Indie was a popular term in the 90s. Independent music, shorted to indie, is music produced independently from major commercial record labels. It's a process that may include a do-it-yourself approach to recording and publishing. The term indie is sometimes also used to describe a genre, such as indie rock or indie pop. Indie, for some reason, always gave a band some kind of immediate credibility in the listeners' and the record industry's eyes. To me, it was all a big joke. Somewhere along the line, it became uncool to be with a major record label. If you were a so-called indie band, then you were hip and modern. If you looked like you were a struggling band trying to make ends meet and recording songs about being down on your luck, you were the it thing. Even the major record labels soon became hip to this way of thinking. They would form small indie offshoots of their giant main record label to trick the average consumer into thinking the band that they loved was coming to them from a small indie label. And it worked. The public wanted to buy records from bands that they thought were on their same level. I guess people thought that they could relate to the music better this way. It was all a farce. I always wanted the bands I loved to be bigger than life itself. Someone to look up to, someone to admire and want to strive to be like Kiss. Shortly after answering the ad for the pop indie rock band, I received a message on my answering machine. "Hey Joe, this is Bill McGarvey from the band Valentine Smith, returning your call about the Drummer Wanted ad." After listening to the message, I was a little confused. For some reason, the name Valentine Smith sounded like an 80s rock band name. I guess it was the word Valentine that was throwing me off. I pictured an 80s hair band when I was listening to the message. Even so, I returned Bill's phone call and wanted to chat a little bit about Valentine Smith. I questioned him rather quickly about the name Valentine Smith. I didn't voice my concern about them being an 80s hair metal band. I just asked them what the name meant. Bill went on to explain that Valentine Smith was a name of the main character in the book Stranger in a Strange Land, a 1961 science fiction novel by Robert A. Heinlein. It tells the story of Valentine Michael Smith, a human who comes to Earth in early childhood after being born on the planet Mars and raised by Martians. Me being a huge science fiction and fantasy fan, this intrigued me and made me much more comfortable with the name. Bill sent out a 3-song cassette that he wanted me to learn for the audition. The songs were Katie's a No-Show, Dress You Up, and Ahead of Her Time. I was pleasantly surprised when I received the tape. The songs were just what I was looking to get into, sort of a cross between Train and the Beatles. It had a very retro 60s vibe to it. I had no idea what they looked like, but I was hoping their image fit the music. Honestly, I'm not even sure what that means. At this point, I was just very concerned with not hearing the term dated or too 80s looking. Because I still didn't have any image to connect to Valentine Smith, I tried to dress as neutral as possible for the audition. Upon arrival, I liked what I saw. It wasn't necessarily what I liked, but they looked much more contemporary to what the music industry was about in the late 90s. In other words, they looked quite ordinary. Everyone had short hair and dressed pretty basic. I could also tell they were a good deal older than I was. I was just 24, and these guys all looked to be in their 30s, except for the female violin player who looked more my age. I was okay with all of that because, like I mentioned, the music industry was no longer about image. Actually, let me rephrase that. The music industry was still very much about image, except now the in-image was to have no image at all. Totally ridiculous. But whatever the industry wanted and accepted at the time, Valentine Smith seemed to fit the bill. There was no way I was going to hear from anyone that this band looked dated or too 80s. The audition went great. They wanted to get to know me a little better, so afterwards we went out for lunch a few blocks away. They filled me in about how they were on a small indie label that was being distributed by one of the majors, and that they were ready to record their new album. It all sounded great to me. After about an hour of talking, they officially asked me to join. Valentine Smith was Bill McGarvey, vocals, Stephen Dima, guitar, piano, Brad Finkel, bass, Kimberly Nordling, violin, and Joey Cassata on drums now. I quickly realized that this band was anything but. It was really the Bill and Steve show. It wasn't a band atmosphere at all. I felt like a hired gun from the get-go. Bill and Steve were the songwriters, and they refused to even accept material from any of the other band members. I think they believed they were like Lennon and McCartney and didn't want anyone else getting any song publishing. It was a very weird vibe from day one. As much as I tried to be friendly and fun with them, it just felt like strictly business. After a show, I would get a check from their corporation and then be on my way. We never hung out, never had a drink together, and we never talked about anything personal. It was the exact opposite of my time in Playground, and I was really beginning to miss those days. Even though the guys in Valentine Smith weren't any fun to be around, I stuck it out because I knew they had a lot of potential. I thought to myself, maybe this is how a band should be. If it was all business, maybe there wouldn't be any petty fights to break us up. Every gig and every rehearsal felt like I was going to a job. It was sucking all of the fun out of playing my drums, but I stuck with it. We began recording the new album in late spring of 1998. The songs that we had slated to record were great. We decided, and when I say we decided, I mean Bill and Steve decided, that instead of recording a full-length CD, we would do only a 6-song EP. I was a little upset because a few of the songs they were going to cut from the CD, like Be Happy and 5 O'Clock Hero, were amazing. But it really didn't matter what I thought. Right before we began tracking, Bill asked me if I could use blast sticks like I'd been using on our smaller shows to record. Blast sticks were a cross between brushes and sticks, and I sometimes used them because we were playing small coffee houses and restaurants. Basically, they made the drums quieter. I didn't know why they would want me to use them in the recording studio, but Steve explained that they were looking for a Ringo-esque type sound for the drums on the new CD. They loved the way the blast sticks sounded live, and they wanted to recreate it in the studio. Once again, I really had no say, so I recorded the whole Valentine Smith CD with blast sticks. The biggest problem I had was that the sticks limited my playing. They were essentially 5 small rods of wood attached to a single handle, which made it virtually impossible to do any ghost notes. As a drummer, ghost notes were a huge part of my playing to create rhythmic undertones throughout songs. Now I was limited to playing just basic solid notes with no texture or dynamics. Even the recording process was work with Valentine Smith. For some unknown reason, they didn't even want any creative input from the other band members. I'm not sure if there was some kind of monetary producer credit thing that they were afraid of, or they were just utter control freaks. I'd probably lean towards the latter. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed playing with Valentine Smith tremendously. I think it's some of the best and proudest work of my career, but Bill and Steve had a way of making everyone feel like they were unimportant, just hired guns, and I guess we were. Once the CD was completed, I found out that the small indie label that Valentine Smith was on was no longer in existence. We would basically be releasing the album on our own with no support or backing. Even with all of these problems, I was very proud of the CD and being a part of the band in general. This was the first band that I didn't really play heavy rock grooves with. My drum parts were much more intricate and complementary to the songs. In retrospect, they were more Ringo-esque. Being in Valentine Smith forced me to become a different kind of drummer. Not a better drummer or a worse drummer, but an overall more balanced and versatile drummer. Here's a song off the Valentine Smith CD called Supernatural.
trumpets heralding? Where's the one you promised me? It's all so ordinary. We are the supernatural. We are love supreme. We're the supernatural. We are the real conspiracy.
We officially released the self-titled Valentine Smith CD in early 1999. It got rave reviews from the critics. Here's a sample from the New York Times. Valentine Smith has the ability to balance its raw energy and pop hooks with melancholy undercurrents. The band may rely on acoustic guitars and violin for folky textures, but their raucous live show proves that it's a rock band at heart. We also had many write-ups in national magazines and press. Here are a few of the blurbs from such articles. Described as classic American pop, Valentine Smith's music has also been compared to early R.E.M., Waterloo Sunset era Kinks, and early solo Paul McCartney. Sculpted out of the neighborhoods of North Jersey and New York, this five-piece band has built a solid fan base touring on the strength of two releases, Back on Earth and Putting in the Peacetime Hours. Billboard magazine put their debut CD on their end-of-the-year top 10 list, while CMJ says they are as wide-ranging as the Hudson River, impossible to overlook.
She takes a little skip right out of the rain and she shakes off her umbrella. She takes the train 1,000 mornings before and she always knows the weather. Try to look at her through bloodshot eyes and a head that's dumb from aching. I need a shower, I could use a good shave, but she best not be mistaken. 'Cause in my better days, made my escape to Houdini's grave with a girl who didn't mind the rain. Too many tears that started streaking her face. I was a hoax in need of practice. Smart enough to lose her faith in love, but she still believed in magic. Well, there's a place where the master lays as he works his best escape twist. So put your coat on and I'll take you today, and I'll make a solemn promise before the setting sun. Before the setting sun is washed away, you're gonna take my hand, you're gonna say my name.
Like I said, even though being in Valentine Smith wasn't what I'd call a party, once the CD was released and I read the reviews and the write-ups, I once again remembered why I was sticking it out with them. My ultimate goal was always to be able to play my drums for a living, and this band was the closest I'd been to seeing that become a reality. Yes, it wasn't what I'd always imagined. I'd much rather be with my friends back in Playground and share success with them, but unfortunately, we couldn't hold it together. A few months after the CD release, we somehow got a few of our songs placed in TV shows. This was about the time when playing original music on new hip TV shows was becoming the it thing to do. The WB and UPN were both new upstart networks, and they were the first to try out original material during their teeny-type series, like Dawson's Creek and the Gilmore Girls. The first show that played one of our songs was the Don Johnson cop series, Nash Bridges, on CBS. I remember my mom being so proud to hear her son playing the drums for a song on TV. There was nothing better in the whole world than making my mom proud of me. I believe we also had a few songs on some WB shows like Charmed, but I was never sure exactly which shows. Dealing with the guys in Valentine Smith was like pulling teeth. I would have to get all of this kind of information from secondhand sources. Can you believe that? They wouldn't even voluntarily tell the other members of the band if and when one of our songs were being played in a TV show. Again, I'm not sure if it was some kind of financial thing or if they just didn't feel the need to tell us because they felt it was their band. Throughout 1999 and 2000, Valentine Smith played dozens of shows throughout the tri-state area. We even ventured as far as Boston and Detroit. Most shows were just local taverns, coffee houses, parks, and restaurants. These places were a long way off from the parties Playground used to have at the Crazy Country Club. Valentine Smith just wasn't that type of band. I hate to say it, but we were more like background music for most of these places. I remember we even played a pizza place in Park Slope, Brooklyn that was filled with snobby yuppies. The whole scene just wasn't for me. In the middle of my run with Valentine Smith, another tragedy hit me and my family. Yukon had become ill, and it seemed like he wasn't going to make it. Yukon and I grew up together, and he was like a brother to me. I did everything with him. We ate together, played together, wrestled together, and even slept in the same bed together. A few years after moving to Manhattan, Yukon's legs started to give him trouble. Our apartment was 3 steep flights up, and it was starting to take its toll on him. Manhattan was no place for a dog his size. He was about 170 pounds at this point, and he was cooped up in my small, tiny apartment all day. It was heartbreaking to watch him suffer. I was basically carrying his whole back end up the steps every time I took him out to pee. I didn't mind doing it at all, and I would do absolutely anything for him, but it was just heartbreaking. By the end, Yukon could barely stand on his own. We had a vet make a house call because he was just too big to move. When the vet finally arrived, Yukon began bleeding from the nose, and the vet told us that he was probably bleeding internally and that there was nothing we could do for him. He suggested we put him down. I told the vet that I needed time to think about it and that we would call him back tomorrow. I prayed to God that night to please take Yukon and let him have peace. Selfishly, I couldn't face the decision of having to be the one to put him down. I laid with him on my kitchen floor for 12 hours. Yukon's favorite food ever was my mom's meatballs. Even in his weakened state and bleeding internally, he still loved his meatballs. I fed him as many as he wanted that night. Finally, the next morning, I called the vet to return to do the unthinkable. I would have to be the one to sign the paper to end my best friend's life. I was sick. I held Yukon in my arms while the doctor administered the lethal shot, and I cried my eyes out. I hugged him so tightly and told him how much I loved him and how I would never ever forget him. And then he was gone. My life changed that day. I've talked to Yukon every day since he's been gone. I always look up in the sky and see a bright star and know it's Yukon staring down on me and watching over me.